Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to another great broadcast. I really am thinking that Wednesdays are, they just must be cursed because it seems like every darn Wednesday I have some kind of issue. And today, as I was driving home from the dog grooming, or the dog groomer, wow, grammar, um, I got stuck. There was a branch in the road. It took about 15 minutes longer than I thought it would to get home, and now it's 6:20 something or other. But in any case, we are live now, and I'm just taking up time, apologizing, and messing around while I look for the link here for YouTube. I do want to make sure I email that out to you. Um, it always takes just a little bit for the link to appear for me uh, for so that I can actually give you the link. And see, it's still not doing it. It's every time it's like a 2 or 3 minutes. And there's no other way I can figure out to do this other than to have you all subscribe to my channel or something, which you are definitely able to do. Um, okay, the volume is muted there. Preview is up. Everything's looking good. Don't you? Why don't you go to my channel? I want to look at my channel. Alright, well, let me just type in my channel name and just do that. So weird. See, look at that. That was just... Why would it do that? My channel. There we go. Why was there an ad? Why would it do that? There's all... See there? There we go. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It was just rather insistent that we have that ad there. All right, here's the link to the 5th broadcast. You're not doing me any favors today, YouTube. All right, I'll send that out, and then I'll send that out to my other section. We'll get started. Today is actually a pretty quick broadcast, to be honest with you. We're just going to go over the rubric for the informative speech, and oh, that's it. Really, informative speech will be due, and I'll write this out on the announcement. Here's a link to the broadcast. There you go. Send a copy out immediately. Good, good, good. Okay. So yeah, we're going to go over the we want to move that up. Boop. Okay, so informative speech rubric tips. So I'll post this on Blackboard as well with the due date as well as an announcement so that everybody has access to it. The informative speech rubric, the way I'm going to grade you on this one, again, the last speech, if you turn it in, you get credit. I will be uploading those grades or updating your grades rather, probably by tomorrow. So by Thursday, the 31st of May. I'm just going a little bit slow this week. That holiday in there really messed around with my schedule. But you'll have grades up for that. Again, the discussion's kind of completion as well. I just check to make sure that you're thoughtful in your answer, really. So this assignment here, the informative speech, is really the first one that we're going to have like I'll call it a real evaluation, where I'm actually kind of checking your assignment to see if it meets the requirements that the department has out for these speeches. Again, the introduction speech assignment is just one that I kind of made up to get you familiar with your technology. This one is a genuine assignment. So I'm looking at the instructor's evaluation form, informative speech in your workbook. For me, it appears on page 125. It might appear on a different page for you, especially because this is a rubric that is typically torn out of workbooks. So if you're using a used workbook, Um, Chances are page 125 will not be where it is, but it will be around there, okay? Um, and if you don't have something labeled Instructor's Evaluation Form Informative Speech in your workbook, that is probably an issue, but we'll be going over all the criteria here on the video, so hopefully this will serve as an aid for that as well. But I always appreciated as a student having the rubric physically or at least electronically written out with me. And unfortunately, there is no electronic version I can copy for you. And they'll tan my hide if they find out that I scanned it in and posted it on Blackboard. So I do have to say, refer to your workbook for a hard copy of this. But the Word document we're about to write here should also have you covered a little bit if you can't find it in your workbook. And if you can't find it in your workbook, you should definitely have words with the person who sold it to you. In any case, let's go ahead and jump right on in here. So the first thing that we look at for a speech is kind of your preparation, and we're already doing that. The two items under preparation, whoa, why can't I type? There we go, preparation. So this is out of 10 points. And we really, all we're looking at, and it's really written out there, says outline. Okay, it does say outline with reference sheet, but I'm not having you make one right now. We're going to do that at a different time for a different speech project. And speaking notes, which is also your outline. So I'm going to write this differently. Outline / speaking notes. For us, on an online section, your outline can serve as your speaking notes. You can have your outline up on your screen and read from it that way. On one hand, you should try to look at the camera while you are speaking. Again, we haven't covered delivery yet, and that's fine, so don't worry too much about having a flawless delivery or what kind of behaviors you should have. You shouldn't look like you're... I will say this, though. Do not look like you're reading directly from your screen. You should occasionally look up at the camera to acknowledge that that's the audience, right? The camera is the audience in your case. But other than that, I mean, I'm not going to judge you too much on that. But what I'm trying to say here is, to try to untangle all this ranting here, is that it should look like you are speaking from notes, all right? And I'm already having you turn in your outline. Many of you have already turned it in already. So in terms of that preparation, most of you already have these 10 points. And these 10 points, again, are our completion points. Did you have an outline? Did you turn it in? If the answer is yes, congratulations, you've got your 10 points. All right, so moving on to the next item here, you have your introduction. I'm just going to abbreviate it as intro. It is worth 15 pointos. And it goes through all of the 5 steps we've already talked about. The attention, the thesis, the preview, interests, and credibility. Okay, so those are the 5. Let me activate my outlining here. There we go, so that it's a little bit more coherent and organized for you. All right, I guess that's the end of the outline. That's the only stuff in the intro. Is I'm checking to make sure you've got all 5 parts. Again, it's worth 15 points. So you can surmise there that if you're missing one of these 5 things, then I take off 3 points. All right. And again, speech. I'll say it this way. Speech is a difficult class to take, but it's an easy class to pass. We're basically at the end of the day kind of evaluating you on whether or not you followed directions and that you have the behaviors that we have told you to have while you're speaking in front of your camera. If you do, you get the points and you skip out of here with a high grade. If you don't, then you lose points, and hopefully you don't lose so many that you do poorly. But in any case, that's all we're looking at here is, do you have the 5 parts? The next part is the body, and this is worth 25 points. This is where your main points live, is the body. It's your main points. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and write that in there. Main points plus the support. All right, so here we're looking for a couple of things. We want to make sure that they are clearly stated, so you explicitly say, hey, my first main point is blah, 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 blah. Um, we also want to make sure that your main point are organized. All right, so you do want to let us know what your first main point is by saying my first main point is yada yada. It kind of goes with the clearly stated bit, but you want it to follow some kind of a logical order. Again, we have not read the part in our book about the patterns of organization yet. We will get to that in between this speech and the next one. Um, but it is important that you have some kind of organization to your speech. And by that I mean each of your main points just has that one main point in it. So if you want to cover, say, 3 topics, let's just give an example here. You want to talk about narwhals, and your 3 points are reproduction, habitat, and the hunting practices. All right. What organized means is that you don't have habitat stuff in, say, your reproduction stuff. Okay, that those 2 points exist as separate things. So as you're turning in your outlines or looking at your outlines, make sure that your example for, say, your habitat information doesn't actually fall under your reproduction main point tab. All right, inside your outline. That way you can make sure that each one of these has, a clearly stated main idea and a clear example that's only for that one main point. Generally speaking, people organize their speech as well anyway, but if you were going to disorganize it, that would be how you do it. You have, like, my first main point is about reproduction. Narwhals live, according to Wikipedia, in the certain regions of the Atlantic Ocean. You kind of see how those ideas don't really match up, because you were talking about my first main point being about reproduction, and then you start giving information about the habitat. Um, so don't do that. So assuming you don't do that, you'll pass that easily. All right. Hello, doggy. Yeah, you feel funny because you've been shaved. I know. Dog's in here trying to lick my feet. Okay, so points supported with appropriate examples and analogies. Again, each main idea needs at least one supporting idea. And again, that would be an example, or anecdote, or a statistic. And make sure your examples, anecdotes, or statistics have spoken source citations. All right, and again, that is just author, publication name, and date published. That's all you need to mention in a spoken source citation. All right. So that, again, it's just really just kind of following instructions in terms of if you have your main point is about narwhal reproduction, have an example or maybe a quote. This could be also a quote. Maybe from, I don't know, David Attenborough, the famous biologist, to support to explain what that process is like. And then you're good on that main point. You can move on to your next one. Speaking of moving on to the next one, that's when we have a great segue there. I'm pretty proud of that. Transitions. All right, a transition is when you let the audience know you're moving on to a distinctly new main point. So this is kind of needs some unpacking a little bit. It says, transition into main point 1 was smooth. Okay, that simply means that you signal that you are moving on to main point 1 from the intro. And that can be accomplished very simply by saying, my first main point is, or even, to begin with, starting on some kind of phrase that says, hey, first main point coming down the pipeline right here. Maybe you don't want to phrase it just like I did just now. That's very casual, but you want to say, first, let's examine the reproduction cycle of narwhals. All right, that would be a perfectly good transition. Then between main points, Your transitions need to signal that you are moving on to new ideas. All right, this is the other part where in your book it says transitions were effectively presented. So this is how you would do that. You signal on, you're moving on to new ideas. And again, you do that by providing a summary and a preview. Okay, so you would say, now that I've covered the reproduction habits of the narwhal, I would now like to cover the narwhal's habitat. All right, that's exactly the transition that we want. All right. So again, that's just signaling you're moving on to new ideas. You have a little summary. You tell us what you told us, then you tell us what you're gonna tell us. That's the transition pattern. And again, make sure you always signal your points. That's what it means by signpost utilizing main points. So that means you always have that phrase that says, I'm moving on to the next thing. So again, you could do, first, second, third. Starting with also next. I'd like to move on to any kind of those phrases. Again, you're just kind of signaling that you're ending one idea, moving into the next, and you give this summary and preview when you're doing that. Okay. And the transition to the conclusion was smooth. Again, I recommend, actually, I know it seems very formulaic, but if you're signaling you're going on to your conclusion, you can say in conclusion, in summary, at the end of the day. That's a little bit more casual, but I mean, you can make that work. Again, some kind of signal that you are ending your whole speech. All right, any kind of phrasing that you think accomplishes that. And then, of course, you have your conclusion. All right, which really only has there are 3 bullet points on your textbook, but I really see the second and third main points as being the same thing, and I'll explain that in a second. So you reinforce your conclusion. Oh, I didn't even tell you what the point value was for the transitions. Let's go ahead and do that. That is 15 points. And the conclusion is worth 15 points. You want to reinforce your ideas, so that means summarize them. So summarize your main points. All right. And I know that sounds really repetitive because you previewed everything in the intro, so you said all your main points once here. And then, of course, you said them several times throughout your body because you're doing these transitions where you're summarizing and preview. And then once again, to end your speech, you are summarizing them again. Yes, it is repetitive, and that should be okay. And you can even be, some of the best speakers use something called parallel structure, in which they use the same key phrases for their main points each time they are mentioned in these steps, right? You can and you want to do that. If that is too repetitive for you, I definitely understand. There is room for art here. If you want to say the main ideas in slightly different phrasing each time, that is also acceptable. But the thing I'm ranting about here is that you really, really need to be repetitive about your main points. All right? And you need to make sure that each summary, each preview, and the preview in the beginning all appear. They should be throughout your speech. You should mention your main points. You only explain your main points once, but you should mention what those main points are several times throughout your speech, is what I'm ranting about. And the last one is that the effective concluding statement. And again, this is really, I think, the thing that makes an effective concluding statement is actually what your workbook here says. It connects with the audience. And for that, I say you want to explain why the audience is better off for listening to this new information. And I know that might sound somewhat arrogant. I think somebody wrote me an email about that. Either it was one of you all or someone in my debate class. But you want to explain why the audience is going to have a better experience as a result of being exposed for this new information. And it can be a simple, humble statement by saying something like, now that we all know about the life of the narwhals, I hope that we have a better appreciation for these unicorns of the sea. Boom. I mean, it varies in opinion as to whether or not that was a fantastic ending statement, but that was, it checks the boxes in terms of trying to connect with the audience here, right? It checks that box. You tried to make the audience feel better now that they have listened to your material, all right? And that's what I'm looking for. Now the last main part of this speech is your delivery, and this is worth 20 points. And there's really not a lot here. Um, you got the good old mainstay of eye contact, which is look at the camera occasionally. And it's just kind of that casual in my evaluation. Are you looking at the camera? Are you making a conscious effort to look at the camera? You don't have to look at it 100% of the time. You don't have to look like a news anchor who just never breaks that eye contact. By the way, news anchors are cheating because the words they're reading are angled such that they are always looking at the camera. So they're cheating just a little bit in a way that you can't. But it should be apparent to me that you are trying to look at the camera. It should also be apparent to me that you have notes that you're reading from. Okay, I should see that. Looking at notes is actually a good thing because people will think that you are prepared for the presentation. Okay, don't try to hot dog it by memorizing your speech. All right, main note taking or looking at notes actually makes people feel in the audience feel like you actually, you put some thought into this thing. You have notes, man or lady. um, Used voice effectively. For now, that just means that volume was appropriate for the setting. Okay, you're speaking probably in a room or even a bedroom. You don't have to be that loud. Um, I am frequently worried that I might be too soft in my videos, but I listened to the video afterwards and it seems okay, and I haven't heard any of you complain about it, so there, it must be effective, right? So this volume that I'm speaking at should probably be all right for you if you're looking for some kind of baseline. And again, one of the nice things about taking this online is that, hey, I don't know how many takes you had to use to get the final product. So if you start your speech and you listen to it and you realize that you just were too soft or your voice was really monotonous and it sounded like even though you actually like frisbee golf, that it doesn't sound like you like frisbee golf at all, then it's a clear sign that maybe you need to do the speech again. And I never need to know that as your instructor. Use nonverbal communication effectively. Again, we have not really talked about this, so let's just go ahead and file that under eye contact again. We will talk about that. But to maintain the pace of one speech a week, basically, we've skipped over that for now, and we'll circle back to it for the next project. And using notes effectively, again, which is just the idea is that I should be able to tell that you have notes. Okay, and that's it. So you got basically two things that say eye contact, so that's really important. And of course, make sure your volume is okay. All right, that's all I'm looking at. I'm kind of looking through here. I will post this after the video if you happen to be watching live. Um, so yeah, we've got a few of you out there, about 5 of you again. So good, welcome everybody. All right, so we're about the halfway point of the video. So let me pull up our example. And what I would like for you to do is I would like for you to open your workbook, go to this rubric if you don't have it already, and let's go ahead and grade with this speech that's coming up. It's really short, and I'm going to play it for you. You don't have to watch it yourself on a separate video. I'm going to show it on my monitor so that you can see it. This is not made by me or any of my students. It's just some person's video that I found. It's a pretty decent speech, but it also has some issues, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. So here it is. It's full screen. Let's do this thing. Oh, I probably need to show you what this video is, huh? There you go. All right, so let's go ahead and listen.
Kim is a vivacious 17-year-old girl who is going to Paris for the first time with her best friend Amanda. The excitement that these two feel is absolutely contagious, and they have only one plan: have fun. Upon arriving at Paris, they meet a very handsome Parisian man who introduces himself as Philippe. He offers to give the two a ride to their hotel, and they both eagerly agree. After arriving at their destination, he invites them to a party later that night and tells both of them he wants to know what room number they're in, so that way he knows where to pick them up later that night. Amanda gives him the information without a moment's hesitation, and then both of the girls rush upstairs to prepare for a night that neither of them will ever forget. Hours later, their room is broken into, and both of the girls are kidnapped, thus beginning a terrifying journey for Kim, who is prized most for her purity. I'm sure many of you have seen the movie Taken, and if so, knows what happens over the course of the hour and a half. Taken is not based on a true story, but it is based on real-life events. Human trafficking happens all over the world, and millions of people are kidnapped or sold into slavery every year. I am going to tell you about human trafficking and the statistics of this fast-growing criminal industry. Human trafficking is very common, especially in countries with harsh economic problems. When I was a girl, we used to live in Germany, and my dad did several mission trips to the Czech Republic. On one of these trips, he happened to see that there were pink and blue curtains on several of the windows in a street. He innocently asked the driver if this was a way for the parents to let people know that they had a boy or a girl. The driver answered, "Well, yes." This was a way for customers to decide whether they wanted a boy or a girl for the night. These parents were, in a sense, pimping their children out. Many people actually defended these parents, stating that this was the best way to keep a family together. The statistics of human trafficking are absolutely overwhelming. 40 million people are kidnapped or sold into one form of slavery or another. 80% are female, 50% are children, and 85% of them all are sold as sex slaves. The U.S. has more cases of human trafficking now than any other time in history. It is estimated through humantrafficking.org that between 14,500 and 17,500 people are brought into the U.S. through human trafficking every year. There is a high demand for domestic service, construction work, sweatshops, and agriculture. It is estimated by ecpat.net that the average age of entry into street prostitution here in the United States is between 12 and 14 years of age. There have been cases of girls as young as 9. Many of these girls find themselves in this situation only after running away from home and putting their trust in someone who then manipulates them into selling their body as a way to pay back all the love and devotion this person has poured over them. Human trafficking can also involve infant kidnapping for the sole purpose of selling that child as an orphan. This is known as child laundering. It's extremely common in Asian countries, which is why Vietnam has now closed off all its adoption processes to American families. American families are their highest consumers, which then causes many of these people to kidnap infants to get the money that they would if these children weren't orphans. There are several websites that give information and help for people who are associated with human trafficking. Humantrafficking.org gives information on how to prevent human trafficking, how to rescue or escape if you find yourself in that situation, how to prosecute an offender, and how you can provide rehabilitation for a victim. In a world that is so advanced and has an air of civility, we live in one of the world's worst eras of slavery. Many of us are either none the wiser or choose to look the other way. Many of you will choose to either take a stand and help those who help themselves, or just even inform other people of what is going on with this ugly, ugly criminal industry.
One of the first words you should say
There we go. Okay, so we are done with that speech there. Let me get back our wonderful word screen there. So there's a few things that I want to us to consider with that speech. I like again overall, I feel like it was a good speech, and there's a couple of things that I feel made it good. The first thing here, actually, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Sorry, whiplash here. Was her delivery. She had a pretty good delivery. She was trying to make eye contact, and I think you could see that when she looked directly at the camera. But it was also able to tell that she was definitely reading notes. Okay, now she had her notes somewhere on her desk or maybe in her lap. She kind of looked down. Again, you can have your notes on the screen in front of you if you prefer. I'm not exactly sure what kind of equipment she used to record that. It looks like she had maybe a digital camera of some sort, and then her computer was in the background running the visual aid. Um, so again, if you're using your computer as a digital as a camera, you can't do that. But um, anyway, the point is, you could tell she was making a genuine effort to look at you, the audience, and she was also making a genuine effort to read her notes or to have the notes or to check her notes to make sure she was covering what she wanted to cover. Okay, so that was actually good. I would, for delivery, I personally would probably give her all 20 points. In terms of her speech, um, again, it was fairly decent. She had an introduction that had all of these things in it, although I would critique it, so I would probably give her all 15 points here, actually. But I will say this: it went on just a little bit too long. I mean, I like that she pulled in the movie that was at that point of time recent as well. So it was, I mean, it was a good selection on how to build attention. You could tell what her thesis was, kind of. This is kind of goes into my critique of that introduction that it was too long. I feel like as soon as you get your people's attention, you mention that movie, you really do want to get to the point. It would have been probably more effective to say, to summarize not really the whole movie like she did, but more or less that, that the movie Taken was about human trafficking, and it brought attention to that issue, and she would like to elaborate on what we saw in the movie, and that would have been her thesis, right? Like we've all had, many of us have had this pop culture experience. Now let's really examine the real phenomenon that it's based on. And that could have been like what I had just said just now. Could have been a very effective introduction as well. She was a lot more artful with it. I will give her that than what I just did. Um, but again, your introduction, if you want like some kind of baseline here, your introduction should be 30 to 45 seconds. Okay. I'm not going to take off. I'm not going to literally sit here with a stopwatch, or more appropriately, since we're not meeting face to face, I'm not going to sit here and look at the time code on your video and be like, "Oh man, your introduction was a whole 58 seconds. Oh boy." I'm not going to do that. But you should know that if you're pushing a minute, and especially if you're going over a minute and you haven't gotten to your first main point yet, that is a clear giveaway that you are spending way too much time on these 5 things. Um, so I'm putting that out there as a tip. But in any case, she did all the 5 things. It was interesting. So I'll give her those 15 points there. So she's doing good so far. In terms of the body of the speech, her main points were clearly stated, and they were fairly organized. She didn't do like I did and skip around the paper here. She systematically talked about the examples and information was about that one idea, and then she would signal she was moving on to the next one before talking about it. There was one moment, I believe she had 4 main points, and there was a moment between her third and her fourth. And of course, now that I've watched the video a couple times, I can't remember what the third and fourth points exactly were. But there was a moment where it seemed like she just kind of started the next one without really telling us that she was going to start a new one. Um, so I might have taken off a couple points there if I could write down on the rubric what exactly that was. But I'll be doing the exact same thing with you guys. If I feel like there was a set, you wrote down 3 main points on your outline, but I feel like there were 4 main points, I would have to have a pretty strong conviction that you actually had 4 main points before I took off points. Um, I'm trying to see how many times I can say points, I guess. But anyway, so I'll probably give her, if not the full points, then the full credit here. I would be like close to it for her. Let's see here, and but there is something I do need to talk about, and I guess this is a convenient place. There isn't a spot for it on this rubric, mostly because the visual aid is optional for this speech, which means it's not going to earn you any extra points, but it could possibly not earn you extra points. There's a couple of things that she did that were not good for visual aids, and we will our last speech we're going to focus on delivery and the preparation material, including the visual aid is kind of the thrust of it. It's going to be a persuasive speech, by the way, as well. Um, but more specifically about right now is um, visual aids can sometimes be a distraction, not necessarily to the audience, but also to you as a speaker. So, and I think that her visual aid suffered from these two problems. First, um, the visual aid, there was a moment where she was going over some information and she quoted a statistic. And the PowerPoint that she had on her monitor in the back there had a different number for that statistic than her actual statement. And so that kind of leads to a distraction among the audience when we're thinking, oh, and which one of those numbers is right? Hmm. And she was oblivious to it. So that's why it's really important that you double check your visual aid. And to be quite honest, if you don't need a visual aid, if your boss or your professor doesn't say you need a visual aid, then it might be better not to have one, because little typos like that can end up being a big distraction. And even if you don't lose points on a distinct part of the rubric, it does kind of take away from the experience of your speech, because then people are kind of wondering whether or not you really know what you're talking about. So it's best, I would say, just to not have a visual aid if it's optional. Again, next speech, it will be compulsory that you have one. Um, and we'll talk about that when the time is appropriate. But this one is optional, so my advice is not to have one. The second thing I want to talk about is that her visual aid was distracting, I think, um, in a different way, because there are points where she didn't have like a visual aid for the thing she was talking about, so she just had a screen there. We had a screen for the movie Taken on it. And I know that she was talking about the movie Taken, and so that's probably why she felt that was appropriate. But the reality is that unless there's some point or main point that you want to emphasize with the audience, that you want them to remember, one of the main reasons why I have that kind of, you know, the video production has kind of infected public speaking, because in reality, like when I'm starting this broadcast, for example, if this really was like a face-to-face meeting, I wouldn't just have that picture of Charlie Cardinal up, right? I would actually just have the projector turned off. And that's when you're doing something face-to-face. You don't have like that filler card or that filler background. All right, you just turn it off, or you have a blank slide, um, so that the audience is not trying to read or get anything in the background. Um, so for a face-to-face, for a presentation in which you're trying to emulate face-to-face communication, and you don't have like bullet points or anything you want the audience to particularly remember about that stuff, don't just, if you're talking about narwhal's reproduction, um, there's a lot of different visual aids that might be appropriate, but one of those visual aids isn't just a picture of a narwhal behind you the entire time. All right. Either it's got to be words, or it's got to be an illustration or a chart, something that will help the audience understand or remember, not filler material. All right. Um, so I'm just putting that out there. We will talk about that more when we have visual aids, but as a topic. But again, that was something that I probably would have taken off some points on for a visual aid. For transitions, again, we kind of talked about it. One of the things I do as a principle of grading is if I was like, oh, were there really 3 main points or were there 4? I'm not going to ding you twice, all right? Because I'll probably come to a conclusion that either you didn't have a transition when you needed one, in which case I'll take off points here and not up here, or I would be like, oh man, those main ideas were kind of jumbled together. It's not organized very well, and I'll ding you on some points here. I won't be a bad professor and ding you twice. All right. One mistake leads to one penalty. But anyway, so again, my rant about that moment where it seemed like she was going on to different main points. Um, I could take off points here in transitions for that. Um, and again, I would comment on that. Um, so probably, if I were to say, I would still give her like most of the points, like 12 out of 15 points when I took off points for the seeming fourth main point that wasn't a fourth main point. I would probably just take off a few points. Her conclusion was pretty good, considering, and so there I would probably give her the full point. So she's looking at a really good grade um, from me. Um, So there you go. And again, it's one of these things where it's not. I know this class is hard to take, especially online, especially with all the technology, and especially with all the issues that you might have with it. So I do make it kind of easy to pass the class, but you can't forget many of these things. Where students in an online class, when they start cruising towards lower than say a B plus, it's because they forget things. So I'm hoping that if anything in this video, um, you look over this video, you look over the announcement that this will become, and you look at your rubric, and you just make sure you're not missing any of this stuff. Um, Whether or not narwhals are really that interesting, that is a subjective thing that I do not grade you on. Whether or not you have transitions, though, is an objective thing that I can grade you on. So it's best that you make sure that you have those in there, right? That each time you have a, say, summary and preview, all right? Make sure you do that. So go ahead and if you haven't already, check over your outlines for all this information. Um, and then you can go ahead and really start recording your speech. There's only one thing I'd like to add here, and it goes to a student question that I had earlier, and I was thinking about it as I was watching that video again. Do make videos. I'm going to sound like I'm shouting it here on the text here. Do make videos in one take. I can't tell how many times you've recorded your speech, and I'm not going to attempt to have you sign a contract or something silly like that where you like, I only recorded this speech one time. I don't really care about that. But do make your videos in one take. It should not be apparent that you did multiple recordings and then edited them together. It should, so make sure you give me your best take. And remember that beyond the stuff that you've written on your outline, I can't tell if you were going to tell a joke about narwhals if you didn't write that joke into your outline. So if you forget the narwhal joke and you're like, man, this speech was great except for that, let's go ahead and splice that in there. And then you have this horrendous looking jump cut in it. I can tell that you're doing some editing. Um, Only a couple people edited their introduction videos. And for that video, I don't really care. But for these ones that are evaluated, I want you make sure that you do the video in one take. The video that you submit is in one take. And by that, I mean you're not editing them together. Okay? You can take as many videos as you need, and then you send me the best one. Don't make a greatest hits compilation where you splice together all your main points that you felt you delivered perfectly, because there are going to be little inconsistencies in the video that make it obvious that you're doing that, and that kind of defeats the purpose of looking at this as a single performance. So I'm going to kind of write that in here. Ooh, that goes on a second page. I don't really like that, but whatever. Each video should be a single performance. Again, what I mean is, record as much as you like, many tries as you like, but do not edit multiple tries together. Okay. I want to see your best try, okay? But do not edit them together. All right. I hope that clears some of that up, and I hope that is um, that assists you in some way. Again, it's mostly because I want to see a speech. I don't want to see a produced video. I know that might seem silly considering the context of an online course, but this is a speech class. It just happens to be taught online. So give a speech. Don't edit a music video together. All right. Um, okay. I think I've prattled on enough. I hope that example helped you out. I hope this rubric and grading process kind of helped you out a little bit. Do continue to ask me questions. Um, as of this video going live, I think I've answered everybody. So if you do have a question that I had not written a reply to yet, please make sure that you contact me again. Otherwise, I'll hear from you later. Oh, see, this is why you got to look at your notes and not be scatterbrained like me. The due date for the introductory speech. Introduction. Wow, the informative speech. Holy moly. Now see, it's getting that time of night, folks. Informative speech due date is going to be Sunday at midnight, which I define as 11:59 p.m. Sunday night, not Saturday night going into Sunday. Okay, that's when you should have your recorded video uploaded to Blackboard. Okay, and of course there will be a broadcast at Sunday at 6, so you do have an opportunity to there's messages. Oh, no messages, whatever. Wait, messages on terms of the YouTube chat window. Nope. So anyway, so that's when that's due. So you should now be working on, now that your outlines are turned in or being turned in, check them for completeness according to this rubric we just went over, and make sure that your recording is uploaded by Sunday at midnight. Right. Another word to that is I did have someone write to me and be like, oh, I didn't quite turn this in on time. Am I going to get a penalty? And I mean, on time meant like she had uploaded it at 4 a.m. the following day. I am not going to be awake on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. to assess penalty points. As long as you turn it in that night, even if it's technically the morning on Monday, we are cool. um, so just go ahead and upload it. If it takes a long time, don't panic. Sometimes these videos do take, especially the longer they are, they will take a while. So I'd rather you do a good job on the speech and that you upload it and it takes 8 hours to upload than have you rush through your speech because you think you're like, oh, it might take 8 hours to upload, so I better just vomit something out and then have it turned in on time. I would rather you do the opposite. Take your time with the speech, take your time getting the best single try to upload, and then upload that however long it takes. Right? Don't worry about it being technically past 11:59 p.m. As long as I have it, when I open my eyes and cast those eyes upon Blackboard, we are cool, and there will not be a penalty assessed. And I'm usually a pretty. Some of you have seen that you send me emails at like 8 o'clock at night, and I might not reply until 11 in the morning, sometimes a little later. The following day, and that's usually the first time I've looked at my email or looked at Blackboard for the day. So just make sure you turn it in Sunday night, even if it's Monday morning. I will not notice or care that much. Okay, now I really am done. That's a bad conclusion, by the way. All right, but thank you again for watching. Oh, Dawn Allen says, I have no. Okay, Dawn, tell you what, why don't you hang out a little bit in the chat room? I'll turn off the broadcast and we can chat back and forth. All right. Okay, for the rest of you, have a great evening, and I will catch you all on Sunday, if not before. Thanks again for your attention and your questions this week.